Okay, we can. We might just have to use this.
Good morning, everyone. Hello, this is Susanna on Conversation with Susanna. We're live. Hi to everyone. My name is Susanna Olatunji Komolafe, and today you're on Conversation with Susanna. I have a guest with me that we are going to be talking about African identity. So this is a 4 series masterclass on African identity. And if you like to join us live while we are having this conversation, I will send a link, and you can see it on Facebook, you can see it on LinkedIn, and you can as well see us on YouTube. So you're all welcome today to my platform where we have conversation on different type of topics. So we have a 4 series masterclass that I'm going to be engaging Mr. Olusegun Morakinyo on. Is the director for the African Heritage Institute here in Ireland. Is an independent research director for African Heritage Institute, and he's going to be talking to us about what it is and what do we mean about African identity. Our identity as African, the idea of changing the narrative with regards to the way we identify ourselves as Africans, either in diaspora or back in Africa, the motherland itself, or how do we as a person see ourselves as African. So guys, welcome today to Conversation with Susanna Olusegun Morakinyo. Hello, sir. How are you? Hello.
You have to unmute me.
You are on mute already. I can hear you.
Okay, very good morning, Suzanne. How are you? And thanks
I'm
for the
fine.
invitation.
And yourself?
I'm fine, Grant. Thanks for the invitation and welcome everybody.
So I will give you just the platform to do a brief introduction of yourself, allow the audience, people that will be listening to us, either students, people within the community, my audience on YouTube, our audience on Facebook and LinkedIn, they will be listening to you right now. We are live on 3 stations. Tell them about yourself. Introduce yourself to them.
Hello, good morning, everybody. My name is, as mentioned, my name is Olusegun Morakinyo, and I'm currently the director of the African Heritage Studies Institute of Ireland. I have a PhD in African History and Heritage Studies. I did my Master's in Equality Studies at the School of Social Justice, University College of Dublin, and I have a Bachelor's Honours in Philosophy, and I have been doing research on African heritage and museum for almost 20 years. I worked for the Robben Island Museum where Nelson Mandela was incarcerated for 27 years, and I worked there for like 10 years. And I was the academic coordinator of the African program in Museum and Heritage Studies. I am in Ireland basically. I've been around here since 2000, and I normally go and come. I'm currently a research fellow at the Center for Transdisciplinary Studies, University of Frontier in South Africa, and at the Department of Philosophy, University of Stellenbosch in South Africa. I'm currently in Ireland for the summer holidays. Thank you.
Wow. There's so many things that for me to start picking up. I'm trying to figure out which one to pick. So you talk about your qualification in African history. Do you want to tell me just a little bit about that? Because this will be the first time that I'm quite aware. I've not that there's a university that gives qualification to people on African history. Did you do that at your master level, or did you do that at your first degree, or when you went for your PhD, that is when you specialize on African history? Tell us a little bit about that.
And that is surprising because there have been degrees in African history as far as we can remember. From the 1960s, African history as a discipline have been taught, and qualification issued from at the University of Ibadan, where it all started. We call it Ibadan School of African History. So there have been, it's a good discipline. It's actually an established discipline. It started with Professor Ade Ajayi at the University of Ibadan, and since then there have been many qualification in African history, both at the undergraduate and at the postgraduate level. Even here in Europe, school like the University of Leiden, Center for School of African and Asian Studies at the University of in London, we issue degrees in African history, and it's the standard degree in American university too, though it's always combined with African American history. But it's a credible discipline.
Okay, that is something for people for myself and people that will be listening to you to take on. Now, you mentioned the university in UK. You mentioned 2 universities in UK that does the African history studies.
Yeah. School of African and Asian Studies will do it, and you'll find the University College of London too.
So the School of African and Asian, is that a university, a private university, or is it just an institute?
It is a big institute on itself, which is comparable to a university. But you know, the British education system, they have different schools attached to a college. So I guess this might be attached to Oxford or University College of London. I'm not precisely sure now.
Okay. And for how long has that been going?
It will have been going before, way back in the 50s and 60s, because it will develop as a colonial discipline. You get what I mean? People, British colonial officers working in Africa will come back, and that's the African studies actually started. We'll come back and then we'll conduct studies for other people who wants to study Africa or who wants to devise policy or understand what is happening in Africa. So it developed from this colonial office. So it's it's old.
Okay, you're going to send me those names, and I'm going to do a bit of research in it just to know when it actually started, and just to understand a little bit about what kind of history they are teaching. Because I have to believe that is the reason that there's a lot of misconception with what African history is, because I'm trying to see what is that link between African and Asian, Chinese people in terms of establishing, and then you can see, you know, now, and I'm just bringing this in, just going outside what we're hoping to chat about. Today we're thinking that, we're all saying that it's possible that we might be colonized by the Chinese. But from what you said now, I can easily just quickly understand the reason, because if they've been studying Africa history for quite a long time, and we are not even bothered to study what their history is all about, you can understand the reason why they would have had a plan in place, because they would have understand, you know, the root, what is it that is there, and of what interest Africa might be to them as their own, as a nation themselves. So, you know, that just gives me that kind of insight.
So, School of African and Asian Studies is actually founded in 1916. As early as 1916. And it is attached to the University College of London, as I briefly mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
So it's not that studying African have been a preoccupation of the West from the very, 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 very beginning.
Wow.
You know, very, very, very early. You know, and in Ireland, 1916 is very instructive in where we are. So it's very old.
Wow. So are you saying that it's happening in Ireland as well?
No, I'm saying 1916 is very important.
It is.
To Ireland. And in Ireland too, there have been very early African studies connected to the Irish people and Irish intellectual, which we might get into in the course of the interview.
Okay, that is fantastic. Now, I don't know if you are seeing the comment space there. I'm going to actually show these. for people to see that 1960 that university has been started in attached to one of the
University.
university,
It's
London.
attached to University College of London.
Yeah, University of London, College of London. Okay. So yeah, so these are part of the information, I think, because this is a master class for people to get to see. It's a 4 series master class, and I think when we come up next, I'm going to put some of these informations together and share it with some of our audience that will have the opportunity to go through some of the things we are talking about today. Now, I'm going to go straight and ask you, tell us more about what you are doing as a person. What are the things you're doing presently? We want to know more about what you're doing presently.
And basically, I'm continuing research on the African heritage of Ireland, because this is a very, very unexplored field. Though you find that the Irish heritage of Africa has been extensively studied by people like Donald McCracken, by Angus Mitchell, but the inverse of the African heritage of Ireland is really being studied. So I'm trying to expand my scholarship and my research on that field, trying to show exactly that there is indeed an African heritage of Ireland. And in the process, because I've just opened the established African Heritage Institute, I've been trying to work around collaboration, finding collaboration, partnership, and eventually looking for possible affiliation with established universities in Ireland. And towards this end, currently now I'm looking to plan an exhibition of African arts, mainly African masks and art and statues, in order to galvanize interest, one, in the African Heritage Institute, and again, to call attention to the African artifacts at the National Museum of Ireland and in other public institutions like the church, where they might have African artifacts, so that we might get access to say, okay, Africans are in Ireland, they are not like, there is nothing about them, there's enough about Africans, about African in Ireland that is beneficial to every African and the Irish community, and it's necessary for them to know. So that's what I'm basically doing now. So the present one, I'm doing conducting research, continue research on the African heritage of Ireland, and then planning. The immediate something I'm preoccupied with now is planning an exhibition of African arts in Ireland.
That is fantastic to know. And also, I know that for us at the African History Educational Center for African Study here in Ireland, we are hoping to partner with you to do this partnership in terms of how do we deliver our studies, our workshops on African history? How do we tell the world about the intersectional relationship that Africa has with Europe, and not just Europe, here in Ireland as well, specifically where we are, and to share this with Africans in Ireland, and to start changing the perspective in terms of the narrative that we put out there for our young people, what it is to be Africa, what it is to be African, and what is African continent itself, and what it is to be African in diaspora here in Ireland. And there's something that I'm hoping we're going to touch as we talk. Talk about Africa pre the Celtic tiger. The existence of African here in Ireland pre this Celtic tiger period. What are those? We're going to touch a little bit about that. So my next question to you is this: what does African identity means to you? We say African identity. I'm an African. I'm very proud to say, you see me, I'm so proud to say I'm an African, but what is African identity to you? When I introduce myself, I don't want people to introduce me as a black person or as a person of color. It's so irritating to me when I see people saying, oh, you're a person of color. I'm like, hello. We're all persons of color. And then, I have that kind of, no. And so I like people to really get to know me. My name is Susuana Olukemi Olatunji, Komolafe. You know, I like to give people a full comprehensive of who I am. From the Yoruba, I'm from the Yoruba nation which is in Nigeria presently. We're still in Nigeria. You know, I want people to know that I have a roots where I'm coming from, the family, you know, that I know me, I know who I am as a person. And I'm proud to share that with the world. So tell me, what is African identity to you?
As you have said yourself, I'll pick from there. When we say African identity, what we are trying to do is projection and projecting Africanness. That means bringing Africanity and Afrocentricity into our lived experience. It involves awareness. Through awareness, scholarship, and relationship to the world is how we position ourselves to relate to the outside world outside us. You know, that is it, because there is, as you know, there is a connection you get between historical consciousness of a people and the faith and confidence they have in themselves and their hope and projection for the future. You know, African identity, you can define it, a lot of people, as you have defined it, you've mentioned blackness, you've mentioned geography, you've mentioned ethnicity, you've mentioned culture. You get one, but all of them are part of African identity we want to project. But it's for us in this field, as we should do, it should be a strategic ideological positioning that is determined by a commitment to the ethics of social justice for the humanization of Africa. So in talking about African identity, a lot of things comes in. To be African is one thing. Everybody, you're born in Africa, you have African parentage, might qualify you as being African. But it doesn't necessarily mean you will live Africanity. It doesn't necessarily mean Africanity means subscription to culture or African culture. You eat African food, speak African language, all those things that are involved in culture. You get what that is Africanity. But meanwhile, for you to project, to actually get, because given where we are now in the world, but for you to be conscious of that, you need Afrocentricity. Afrocentricity is a disciplined, studied, conscious position, you know, of being an African. And why you need this Afrocentricity is to project your Africanness. You get what I mean? To actually, to move it beyond, say, I'm just an African. And as I will go, a million of people are Africans, but they don't have Africanity. They actually deny the Africanity because they don't want to identify with the culture. You get what I mean? You can say you can say you can find an African who is other people, who is other things. He's an African, but he actually detests something like African spirituality or African image. You get what I mean? And a lot of it, some of them are petty, some of them are grand. You get what I mean? That you find an African is by birth an African and is black, but all he's trying to do is not just an African. He believes he is non-white because his aspiration as African is to become the other. You get what I mean? That is and Africanity again is people, you deny the culture, you say, oh, I don't want nothing to do with African culture because of misinformation or distortion. And then Afrocentricity is a disciplined position. You have to study it and be conscious of it. And projection of Africanness is what we can call, in some instance, is modern African, you know, bringing in from your past, looking at what is happening in the world. Africanness is more like Afrofuturism. You get what I mean? What you find in films like Wakanda, that is what the Africanness. You didn't forget the culture, but you have moved with the time and advanced it technologically. You get what I mean? But that is what everybody tries to do. You get so when we talk about African identity, it is not just limited by color or by birth. You can be black and be African. But blackness is not the only determinant of being African. Because blackness, if you take blackness as in color, as it's being used around there, it's just color. But if you can take blackness again, as people use it in black consciousness, that means you are black by virtue of being oppressed by white supremacy. So in here, we can have West African, we can have Asian, we can have Caribbean, we can have any other group that are marginalized by white supremacy. So that is the political configuration of blackness as distinct from color. Because blackness does, in Africa, all of us are African, but not all of us are black. And increasingly, as you are living, blackness is not enough to say you're an African. Neither is geography. Some people are African, they will never go to Africa, and they've never been in Africa. Marcus Garvey, the greatest proponent of Africa, wasn't born in Africa, he was born in Jamaica, and he never set foot in Africa. So geography that I am born in Africa is in Africa.
But sorry, just to intersect you in there, just to be able to get that point across. He wasn't born in Africa, but if we go back to talk about African identity, he was living an Africanity life.
It's actually
go ahead.
It's actually the greatest proponent of Africanism. What I'm trying to say is that when we say blackness, most Africans are black, but not all Africans are black. And blackness is not enough to define African identity. The blackness of the color, I will come to that, is not enough.
Yeah, just to bring it in, being black, one, doesn't make you Africa. It shows your ethnicity in terms of the possibility, race or continent that you might be from, and that is what we're trying to talk about. Our color, either you're black or brown, it doesn't say, oh yes, I'm an African person. Yes, it's one of the characteristics that we can associate with your identity as an African, but doesn't make you. But what really we are trying to say, there's a difference between blackness. Blackness, that is something else I would like us to talk about. There's a difference between when you say I can identify my blackness in me, and in terms of that goes in terms of our culture and identity. But what makes you an African person is living that life as an African person, in terms of embracing the culture, in terms of embracing the traditions, the heritage, in terms of your life not being westernized, and really actually, influencing that your life is influenced by what it means to be an African person. And I think that is a message we want to get out there in terms of identity. But I just want you now to give us a summary that you as a person, you, Olusegun Morakinyo, what is your African identity?
And that's where we are coming from, because we mentioned two things. We mentioned African as in blackness, African as, that is color, biology, African as in Africanity, subscribing to African culture, speaking African languages, and be proud of it. But then we have to move into the kind of Africanness, African identity I actually subscribe to, which is determined by Afrocentricity. That means African-centered, based on the African itself. My definition of African will be based on affiliation to history and culture. And what brings us into Afrocentricity, which is a conscious studies perspective of what it is to be African. You get what I mean? Then you project that. Because we have, a typical example is Nigeria. And Nigerians, they have Africanity. They wear African clothes, eat African food, but they don't have Afrocentricity. They are basically, all these people, they wear all their gaps and everything, but they will still tell you they are not African first, but they are either, they define themselves through religion. They are either Christian or Muslim. They are never African in that space. Though they speak African language, they eat African food, they wear African clothes, but they have Africanity, but they don't have Afrocentricity. That means their projection of Africanness is actually distorted, and it's not that kind of African identity we should be projecting. My whole notion of African identity is basically defined by a strategic ideological positioning, that is committed to the ethics of social justice for the historical accident of racial dehumanization of Africa. So it's an ideological commitment, which makes the kind of African identity I project can be Irish blonde, as well as a Noah black or a mulatto jack. But because the essentials, the emphasis is on strategic ideological position, this commitment to correcting the false image of ourselves in terms of culture, education, religion, and economics. if we define Africans so well in this kind of way, especially in this island, we can a lot of things you can see. We can in this if you define it like this as a strategic ideological position, then somebody like even Daniel O'Connell, way back in the 60s, in the early century, 1800, 1845, 18, can be an African if you look at his position on slavery. You know, it's anti-slavery position, but because he is committed to the ethics of social justice for Africa, abolition of slavery. And likewise, you can look at people like Martin Bernard, who wrote The Black Antenna. You can look at them as African. But you can look at some other Africans too, given what they are doing, and say this can be African. People like currently you can look at the landscape of we limit ourselves to Nigeria. You can look at what the politicians are doing. Is it African for what is that an African? Someone who took all the wealth of Nigeria and bring it into Europe. What is it? Can you say that is an African? Do you say that is projecting an African identity? So for me, African identity, which is it involves blackness, it involves the continent, it involves our culture. But what actually the kind of the one I live is this commitment, this strategic ideological position, studied, conscious, reflected on, to say, okay, this is what Africa means. I am conscious of the historical accident of racial dehumanization of Africa, and I am committed to try to restore the humanness of Africa. So that is the kind of African identity I think is we want to project, so that it goes beyond simple, oh, because we are all black, because we all speak the same language and we are the same. The humanness of
go ahead, sorry.
You know, so that is the kind of ability I want to try and project. And one of the most important thing about all this, our notion of African identity, is the historical consciousness. It is important to be conscious of who we are, how we come to where we are now, to be conscious of our pre-slavery history, what happens to us during slavery, and how we struggle against slavery. Because the important thing about identity projection is self-definition. You have to be able to self-define your own identity. Although the world is a social space, but what allows contribution and mutual recognition and respect is self-definition by ourselves as Africa. And what had not been occurring to date is that we never self-define. We are always defined through the eyes of the other, which is a problem. So I will want to just leave it there and say African identity is projection of Africanness based on Afrocentricity.
Just thank you so much for that contribution. One thing that you mentioned there that I quickly want to lay a little bit more emphasis on is this. You talked about Daniel, is that the
O'Connell.
Irish O'Connell? Yes. Daniel O'Connell. Yeah. Is it the one on O'Connell Street there?
Yeah, that is it is. And that is why, if you really know what we are trying to do at the African Heritage Institute, is bringing this kind of consciousness to the fore. Because if you know African and Irish history, and you are African in this Dublin, when you walk on O'Connell Street, it's enough to give you a deep sense of belonging. Because this is actually your very good heritage. This is somebody that actually stood for you at the very, very crucial time in the existence of Africans.
Now, I think what I would say of him, instead of calling him that there's an Africanity in him, Afrocentric kind of Africanity in him, I think I would say there's a blackness in him. So I can define that as blackness rather than, because blackness in terms of association. In terms of association, and I can also agree with you on the basis of his social justice stratotopes, that in terms of social justice, it stands for social justice to human race. So it wasn't really about the fact that I'm an Irish person, I'm this, but it is about the human race itself. That social justice that should be accredited to every single one of us. Was it recently when we were celebrating the African Day here in Ireland? I traveled purposely because of part of the programs that we were planning to County Donegal, but specifically to Canal, where we have the Atlantic trans trade, to see the location. And I was amazed with the contribution of James, the man that sang the Amazing Grace. And that was the first time that I realized it was an Irishman that actually sang that song, Amazing Grace. And the role he actually contributed to in terms of ending the slave trade, during the slave trade. So these are Irish people that have actually shown what we are both talking about today in terms of African identity, in terms of their blackness, in terms of their social justice, talking about human race, in terms of what it is that as an African person, wherever you are as a woman being, you have the freedom of expression. You have the freedom to be able to live your life. You shouldn't be enslaved or be controlled in that kind of a way. And I think I say today there's a modern day slavery that is more deeper and deeper in our community today than we've ever seen. I don't know if you agree with that, but that is what I'm seeing
Yeah.
today.
Yeah, you are right on that because it's mental slavery we have now. The chains are off, but the head chain is still there. It's basically mental slavery, So, but it
Yes.
will work out. It takes. That's why I say Africanism or African identity, African consciousness, African historical consciousness is the state of the mind. It's consciousness. You get what I mean? Though we are
Yeah.
free, but we are still in chain. We are still in mental chains a lot. That a lot of Africans, either on the continent or outside of the continent, what the greatest thing they are running away from is that Africanness in them. By any means, they just don't want to. It's like if they're able to actually transform themselves into other beings, they would. And this is due to education. This is due to culture. This is due to economics. That you just want to say, don't bring those African stuff here, and which is essentially what you'll be bringing.
Yes, yes. I'm so interested. I'm just so amazed because with this masterclass that we're going to be doing, you talk about our state of mind, slavery. That yes, the chains are off, but it's still there. And I know that our second episode will be on African psychology. And I think we're going to explore that slavery of the mind when we talk about that. I'm so excited because
Yes.
I've been trying to figure out some of the questions that we're going to actually have a talk about in terms of that. And I think that is one of the things that I'm going to bring into that. That yes, the chains are off, and how does that affect our psychology as an African person, in terms of the way what influence our thinking, because that is based on the way I define African psychology. And thank you so much. Now we go to the next question, which is African voices in Ireland. Do you think our voices is making an impact here in Ireland? Have you seen that impact? And you might just give me one example of what you feel that really shows that our voices here in Ireland as African is making an impact. And that is the first thing. Do you think we're being heard, as in, being listened to? And for you, how do you define African voices?
Thank
So, you as a person today, Olusegun Morakinyo of the African Heritage Institute, you are a voice. You are a voice. I would say you're a voice in the wilderness now that is shouting and saying to the world, come and embrace our African heritage. Come and get to know what African heritage is. So that is a voice you are representing. And that is what I'm saying. But tell us, do you think African voices in Ireland, what is the impact that we are making? Give us an example of that impact. Do you think we're being heard, as in being listened to? And
yes.
can you define what African voice? means to
Yeah,
you?
okay. Let's
I will put the
define.
question later on, but take it one by one.
Defining African voice basically, as I explained to you, is African voice is for me defined by Afrocentricity. That means you are African centered, you are conscious of the history, you are conscious of the culture, and you are ready to project Africanness, not any morbid Africanity or any simply being African, but you are actually committed to Afrocentric projection of Africanness. It's an African centered articulation defined, as I mentioned, by an ideological position of the ethics of social justice for racism and all ills African have. So I'm actually correcting the negative image of Africa, the negative perception of Africa, not through what we say, but how we live and our approach to scholarship, our relationship to people, our the way we build our community. And the big question, and because hearing African voice is very important too, because, and that is, we will go to African identity and our place in any community, in island, among ourselves, especially in the diaspora. We're here to contribute because there's something specific about Africa. There's something we can say is not only we can unique, might actually be a problematic term. But what we bring into any space is what our Africanity bring into any space is this yearning, is this humanism, what we call Ubuntu, this collectiveness, this love for people, this strive for harmony, strive for peace, strive for unity. That is what is defined Africanity, this Ubuntu spirit, this humanist spirit, like you can say in Canada that just died, is particular about African humanism. Desmond Tutu will talk about Ubuntu. Mandela will talk about the same Ubuntu. And it's even at the presently this whole Northern Ireland peace process. You can see the involvement of South Africa, the current president, even before he became the president. You get what I'm. This it was part of it. Cyril Ramaphosa. This kind of things we bring in. This is our uniqueness. That is why as we go there and say what we bring into the community is the African voice. And then again, are we being heard? We are speaking now. This is a classic example of an African voice. So that is there. This what we are doing is a classic example. And you can see it in many initiatives, like the ones, this African Diaspora Forum, African Center, a lot of African organizations in Ireland trying to bring out what is it to be an Africa. But then so we can say, yes, we are being heard. But is it really African voices? Or is it a mediated translation of African voices? However sympathetic. Is it really our voice? You get what? Are we really speaking? Or are we speaking?
Are we really speaking? Or yes.
Are we really speaking? Or is our speaking mediated by others, by our economic consideration, by our need to be, are we speaking from a position of ourselves or from a position of just to find something to eat? Or, a lot of economics. So what we can say, we are being heard, but are we really speaking? Is this our voices? Is this our affirmative, confident voices? That is the challenge we think we have. We are speaking, we are being heard, but is this really our voice? Is it us speaking, or are we speaking from a place of consciousness of African heritage, consciousness of what we can contribute, or consciousness, or are we still speaking from this how you call it, a beggar syndrome? You get what I'm calling? Africans have nothing.
You're totally right. Or are we seeing, as well, you can say, are we speaking from a place of knowledge?
Yes.
In terms of changing our narrative. Or because I know before we did this, we spoke about, we did spoke about what is happening in our community, especially with our young people, the narrative they are giving out there, the way they are portraying Africa. Is that what we want them to put? Is that what we really are? Because they are actually doing a mixture of what it means to be African. What is an African identity? Because I've seen our young people, they're taking so much mixed culture. They're taking what it means to be an African American descendant. They're taking what it means to be an African British person, what it means to come within the Windrush, what it means to be an African Irish. So what it is to be an Africa, as in Africa itself, So there's so much mixture in the identity that we are putting out there. So you're totally right, is that what is the message we're putting out there? What kind of African voice are we seeing in our community of today? So this brings us to the next question. What
No,
is
before you go there, I want to just say something,
Go
Sorry,
ahead.
man. Because
No.
specifically in the context of African heritage, I would want to argue that our voices is not only muted, as you said, but it is distorted. Because if you can go all around this island and people will tell you, oh, African, no, nothing like that. Because you say, what African you are talking about? So I'm saying that in our voices in respect to African heritage of Ireland, is that it's like an unrecognized relative. You get what I mean? That is never introduced to visitors. You get what I mean? That you are there, but that is why you say but you treat it as, oh, they just come with the wind rush. They just come with this thing. But to say, okay, they actually been very, very a long-standing family member. So I say in African heritage, our voice is not only muted, but it is distorted and treated like just abandoned there.
I'm going to stop you there. There's somebody asking a question on LinkedIn. His name is Toby Ekundayo, and he made reference to this. So I'm going to read it out to you. In terms of bringing about this awareness, can the African heritage be broken down into nuggets that can be easily learned and constantly re-emphasized? How do you understand that? I put it on the screen there, so I'll read it again to you. And this is from Toby Ekundayo on LinkedIn. In terms of bring about this awareness, this awareness that that we're trying to create about African heritage, can it be broken down into nuggets? Do you want to just give us what are the type? I think what it's trying to get us to say is that, can you just give us a broken down list of this kind of heritage that we are trying to create awareness on? And that be easily learned and constantly re-emphasized? And that is what the question is.
Yes.
And Toby, if you want to join us, you can join us live. And if you want to join on this conversation, you can. I'll send you the link as well, in case you're thinking of joining us on this conversation. Yeah, go ahead now. Yeah.
Yeah, you see, as in everything, that is a big question, because we are now talking about a mammoth. We are talking about an elephant. We are not going to just look at it as a whole. So one, African heritage, it has to be broken down into small nuggets, and that is why it's a course of study. First, we have to clarify what is heritage itself. That is what is really heritage. That takes another, because as you say, African Educational History Institute, we have to, what is heritage? Then we have to see what is African. Then what is African heritage? We've combined that now. Then we say, where are they? You get what I mean? So it's a process, it's a procedural study that it's from one knowing this to go to the other. So it can actually be broken down. And when eventually, by the time you know and you are conscious of it, it has to be constantly reinforced. And that's why we call it a research institute, that we not only, one person cannot do all the research, but it will lead to further research from other participants, who is going to see different aspects of the heritage. You get, so it is meant to be broken down in piece, so that at the level, the kind of exposure we will have for a primary school kid will be different from the one we will have for a university undergrad or somebody doing research at a postgraduate level. So it can always be broken down geographically and epistemically, depending on where you are and the age group and your interests. You get what? The kind of knowledge of African heritage a white Irish mother of a black child want to know will be different from the kind of African heritage someone who was born in Nigeria and is now living in Ireland will need.
Yeah.
So it can always be broken down.
Yes, and just to add to what you're saying, and I would like you just to emphasize that there's something that is coming up very soon. We're going to do it virtually as well, so that we can reach a global space. during the time we're doing the exhibition. The African Heritage Center will be working in collaboration with us as well to do this. We're going to work with you to do this exhibition of African heritage in terms of. So do you want to just tell us that again? So hopefully that will pique an interest to people that are there watching us. Just to tell us what they should be expecting in terms of the exhibition that is coming up.
Yeah, basically we're going to create an exhibition of African art, mainly consisting of masks and statue. And why we are doing this is trying to galvanize, to encourage interest in African heritage in Ireland, not only by what we have, which is just basic specimen and very good representation of African art, but again, to point us, to bring awareness and interest in the African heritage, the artifact of African heritage in Ireland, at the National Museum, at the Catholic churches, and in private institutions. So that we know that there's enough of African here to learn. Right there on Stephen Green, there's a massive African heritage that Africans pass every day, but they never will think this is African. But it's right there, it is right in your face. It's like hiding in plain sight. People don't know the connection to Africa, and Africans take no pride in it. So things like that, we'll be able to point out, going from the exhibition of African art, to say, look, this is not only here. If you go to the museum, there is enough of African you can see. If you, maybe the Catholic Church will give us a lot too. And then African connection, awareness of African, you know, not just as an isolated entity, but as deeply ingrained in the Irish nation, will be brought to the fore. So that is what we're doing about the exhibition, and I think you should watch this space for the exhibition. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. So we go again, and this is to say, in Ireland today, I'm the founder of the African History Month here in Ireland, and we've been celebrating the African History Month since over a decade here in Ireland, and we do it in the month of November. So if anybody is out there watching us and you're thinking you want to join us in the celebration, it takes place annually in the month of November. It's a whole month series of events that we put in place. And this year we have so many people coming from America, coming from UK, coming from different African continents to join us in collaboration in celebrating the African history. And we will be looking forward to having you to be part of it. So takes me to the next question. What is African history in Ireland? And I want you to, you know, I know when we talk about African history, we talk about the history of Africa as the continent of Africa itself. That is one aspect of African history. The other aspect of African history that we love to really emphasize here, and that is one of the things we're doing, is about profiling, projecting positive image of Africans that are living in Ireland today. The Africans that are living in Ireland today, we project them, we profile their image, you know, in a positive way about changing the narrative. I want you to give us a little bit insights into Africans that are living in Ireland, the history of Africans that are originally in Ireland before the Celtic Tiger. Now, I know that during the Celtic Tiger, which is around 2020, 1999, between 2002, 2000 till date, there was there was this massive inflow of, I call them new African in diaspora today, into Ireland where we are. So we had this kind of massive inflow. But before the Celtic Tiger, before the 2000, there's been a lot of Africans that has been living and making Ireland their home. There's been Africans that have come for decades into Ireland. I actually have a friend that I know that says he's been living in Ireland for, as at this time now, he's been living in Ireland for over 40 years in Ireland. And when I first met him, and I was like, wow, so do we have people that has been living over 40 years here in Ireland. That's, has made Ireland a home. He has a business space there in O'Connell Street around Dublin area there. And and that's just nothing. There's so many people. There's people that are, that has been, they were born and now they will be around 40, 50 years or more of age. And we can also talk about Philip. I don't know if you've heard about Philip. I'm sure you might have seen his image there in O'Connell Street. He was a musician. His mother, he was a mixed Irish. He's the kind of person we call African Irish today. So the history has been there. So you just give us a little bit, just a talking, so that when, because we said this is a masterclass, and I put there in the comment there, we are taking registration for our series of workshop that is coming up, and Shegun will be one of our speakers and lecturers that will be, giving us insight into what African history means here in Ireland. So tell us about that. I'm so, Uncle, I'm really, really totally, and this is my Africanity coming out here when I say that, Uncle Shegun, that I'm really excited, looking forward to, just making this impact here in Ireland with you in terms of what African history and heritage means to us. So tell us about that. Yeah.
Yeah, and thank you very much, sis. Because this is a very long telling about African history in Ireland, or history of Africans in Ireland. And you've already mentioned a lot of nuggets there. It's a long history. I cannot be addressed in a single session. That's why it's good that we are going to be having series of lectures and series of workshops to actually unpack it, so that other people can pick it up and it can be very, very expansive. But here in Ireland, the intersection, because what we talk about, we can talk about African, this is one, the intersections and African presence in Ireland, and the presence here can be physical or epistemologic, intellectually. For instance, we talk about, if you look at the prehistory of Ireland, everybody recently hear about the origin of Ireland being black men with blue eyes. You get what I mean? And people will tell you about the history of the Fomorians who were originally here. So either those things are true or not. But the point I will make it as being part of African history, that it is studied. That as early as the 1800s, there is study of these possible myths. You get what I mean? That it's the island connection to Africa. Way in the 18th, there are scholarship on it. And again, because when talking about African in Ireland, is way back before, even antique Ireland, before it in the 1800s, before Douglas came here, there have been history of supposedly African or Irish connection as coming in from North Africa. Where does the Irish gold come from? What is the relationship of Irish music to the Tuareg Berber music? So there's a long history there of African being in Ireland. So that is way deep. And for us, even if those myths are not true, but that is what I call is epistemic, it's intellectual. The mere fact of it
that is why you call them myths, and it's at the same time, you use the word myths. It's just to say it is there. We can't discard those history and say it is not true. Yeah.
Yeah. So no matter what we discard, whether we agree or not, the mere fact as it is being studied already constituted an African presence here, because it's actually in the head, the epistemic space. And if you look at Irish literature too, you get what I mean. There are a lot of allusion to African. That is already a presence in the Irish psyche of African as being part of Ireland. And then you after you go to contemporary, say, history of slavery. Anti-slavery is enough, is big. And from there, you can actually start finding factual evidence of African presence in Ireland. A lot of people all over the continent, because remember, Ireland, though they are not a slaving colony, but they actually have affiliation to slavery. They supply slave goods. So some people will bring their servants from the Caribbean here. So there's always a conscious African presence. And if you look at the study, William Hart wrote a paper about African presence in Ireland. And this allusion there is about a girl being actually a woman and a child and a child being looked at as curiosity in front of this present Trinity College. And what they said was, the newspaper then said, well, this thing would have been a big thing if this is actually a novelty, but they are not actually a novelty. That means there's enough African presence even in the early 1800s, 1700 here in Ireland, and so that one is there. And we can then go back again to the struggle for independence in Africa and in Ireland. It is deeply connected. And for you to get this story, you have to see how much Ireland is connected to Africa and how much African history is existing here.
Sorry, you said African presence. Sorry, that African presence has been in existence since, is it 1890 or 1918?
Before then, in the 1700s, 1600, because slavery will start around 1600. So by the 1700s, Africans, you'll find African presence here in Ireland. Either as people brought as servants, as escaped slaves. So it's always there are always Africans living in Ireland. There might not be many, but there's record of them. Slavery actually gave us factual records that we can consult in the archive and say, if you look at newspapers of the period, we can actually say, okay, this is one here, this is two here, there's a lot. A musician, a lady musician. So there's a lot that in the scholarship we can explore. You get what I'm saying? So there's enough there.
Yeah.
So, and when we now come to history of liberation of Africa and Ireland, we can't forget that even the history of this continent, of this island, of modern Ireland from 1969-20 cannot be divorced from Africa. Someone like Otto Griffin, the founder of Sinn Féin, came back from Africa to form Sinn Féin here. You get what I mean? That is more story to do. And again, we have the popular Roger Casement. Roger Casement, and for us to show the significance of African and Roger Casement, I don't know how many people see the 1916 exhibition at Collins Barrack. It has since been removed. In this, if you go into the exhibition, at the very, very right, in the beginning of that exhibition, in a case dedicated to Roger Casement, you find a Congo axe. They say a Congo battle axe. It is, and this is the Ireland most nationalist exhibition. You find a Congo axe there. What is the Congo axe doing in an exhibition dedicated to the Irish nation? It shows the Africanness that you cannot attach, you cannot detach.
Yeah.
African from Ireland, and it shows the ever presence of Ireland, of African in Irish history through that battle axe. It's something we should actually explore in bigger details. And again, you talk about African being here. In this modern times of say 1930, 1920s, when people start studying, you mentioned the mixed race Irish. And that is another constituency we should actually say that they are more like the ancestors of the present diasporan African. You get what I mean? Because they can,
yeah.
They are, you see the journal.re, they have this series they call I Am Irish. It starts with this mystery.
Yes. That's a meaning, I am Irish, yeah.
And actually, it's a journal.re, it's a video, and so people should see it. It's on YouTube. So it shows that the presence is there. And that's why I said they are like unrecognized relatives. You get what I mean? That you are really introduced to people. So the presence is always there. So it's enough for us to say that there is enough African heritage in Ireland and Irish heritage in Africa. So when we want to talk about African history in Ireland or history of African in Ireland, it's two-phase. We have to talk about African heritage in Ireland and Irish heritage in Africa. You find people thought it is only now. You find some very, very big, some very, very important personalities who are born in Africa, but they are Irish. Either they are government official, either they are part of British colonizing, but then there are people here. And one thing which we can't find space to hear is the beloved Guinness.
I think there's so much that we're going to tap into, but because of our time, I'm going to try and get some things in, and just for us to start working towards rounding this up. And what I would like to say is that what would you like people to take home today? Well, what would you like people to really take home, so that when they join us on the second series, people will be looking forward to say, I want to see Olusegun talking. I want to see what he's going to be saying. So what is it that you really want us to take home? That is number one thing. I want you to be very brief about it. Just say, this is what I would like people to take home. And at the same time, what advice today are you going to give to other African Irish that we have today? People that is identified today as African Irish, what advice will you want to give them? And that takes me to you, yeah.
Okay, what my takeaway for people is that we should know that there are immense potentials and empowering opportunities psychologically, social, cultural, and economics for historical consciousness of the African heritage of Ireland. As I mentioned earlier, historical consciousness is what allows you to have faith in yourself, to be confident, not to come around the space as dejected, as a beggar. If you are conscious of this history, both as an Irish person, or as an African person, or as an Irish African person, you get what I mean? It's psychologically uplifting for you, and it will help. The moment you are psychologically uplifted, you don't have a problem in going around your society. You get what I mean? You'll be proud of your culture, you contribute more, and you're able to participate more in economic activities. You get what I mean? That newfound consciousness, because it's the mind. You don't have this negative, you are ashamed of this, you are proud of it. Because this Okono Street I'm working on, it's as much African as me. This is my heritage all around the place, because it affirms you. You get what I mean? So that's what I want people to take.
It really affirms the way you relate, yeah. So it really affirms the way you relate with yourself as your African identity, because you can, like you said, you can see it all around you. You walk in O'Connell Street with pride, knowing that my presence has been existing since that. And so I'm not just here now, but the presence of me as a person, as my identity as an African, is way far back since 1700. So what advice will you give to African Irish? I will call myself the modern day African Irish, and I'm sure my son will do the same thing. So what advice will you give to us out there, especially to young ones that have this kind of new narrative of the way they want to see themselves as African Irish?
Yeah, it is that they should bring out their Africanness, because if you bring out your Africanness, then you have something to contribute. We should avoid this, and that is the greatest all over the globe. It's not only here and everywhere. We should avoid this syndrome of pity, beggar syndrome. Oh, there's nothing. Imagine, it's not only material, culturally, there's nothing I get to contribute. I have to beg and try to ingrain myself into other sphere. And you go there like a beggar. It's like the lack, the hate, object of pity, object of charity, where you have everything. That is actually is very, very demoralizing. That's when you think yourself as a problem. You are always coming to beg. And it's all over the space. Other people come here and say, oh, I am this, I am there, I can contribute. And we do it to the point, even when we have, you can see what Kagame, the president of Rwanda, will say. Why do we even beg for things we have? How do we? So we should stop that beggar mentality and come and assert ourselves that, look, we have something to contribute. That is what, even if it's not material, we can contribute our humanness to the old faith. That is what I want. So to bring in out Africanness is moving away from this beggar syndrome. I want to stop there.
It's just so interesting to just to what you're saying, and just to listen to you as well. Sorry, I want to say thank you there to join John, you're watching us there. And just to say thanks to every other person there that is watching us as well. But when I see people that I identify, just to say thanks, John. So what I want to say is this, it's just so interesting to when you talk about this begging mentality. this idea of, and then at the same time, I think it goes down to the fact that the Western world always believe that they everybody wants to come to Africa to do charity work there for us, to help us. We this continent, this underdeveloped continent. And this underdeveloped continent is the same continent that is feeding the whole entire universe. We are the second largest in the world today, within the universe. We are feeding the whole universe with the resources we have. And yet we are being, portrayed as underdeveloped continents. We're being portrayed as underdeveloped continents. And I think it is time, you said, that this ideology around African being poor, African is not a poor continent. African is a land of resources, a land of richness. I think this idea of the Western world using us as a grant for AIDS, and this woman that was previously the I've forgotten her position now for the African Union. She was
in New York, in
New
Africa,
York
at the UN.
Yes, she was, she's so irritated about the idea of the Western world continue saying they are giving us AIDS, and this is what has destroyed Africa in itself. And our leaders itself has allowed themselves to be totally inhuman to this idea of begging, like you said, in terms of looking for AIDS from Western world. So this is something that this is the type of narrative we want to start changing. This is the type of Africanness we want to preach to the world. This is what we are talking about. It's about people changing their attitude in terms of what it means to be Africans, in terms of your identity as an African person. This begging kind of attitude needs to stop. Now, today, I'm not going to allow you to walk away, or we're not going to end this without me asking you this. You won't believe in us without me asking you, what is your take? What is your take, Olusegun Morakinyo? I love that name, Morakinyo. What is your take on the word racism? That is number one. And policing in Ireland today, because today in Ireland, you will see us, we keep emphasizing racism. We talk about policing, the effect of policing, and in Ireland. Now, the family of George Inkenshaw and other organizations in Ireland today, they are requesting for a public inquest to the death of their son, who died on December 30th, 2020 at appropriate 12:30 a.m. That was when he was gunned down with 6 shots. That 6 shots was identified by the postmortem. What is your take on racism? What is your take on policing? And what is your take on the fact that the family of George Inkenshaw, the community, the African community, African Caribbean community here in Ireland today, everyone is calling for a public inquest into that crime, that sin that happened on the 30th December 2020 at appropriate 12:30. His life was taken.
First, condolence to the loss of life, and sympathize with the family. But if you talk about racism, I will address racism and policing, and I will see how far I can address the issue of, you mentioned about George and what transpired in the public inquiry. But talking about racism, I'm coming from Africa. I'm coming from South Africa. So for me, if you say racism, let's talk about individual, societal, institutional, and civilizational. Yeah, completely. You find if coming from South Africa, I can say individual racism is non-existent because you can even my children here who grow up here, if I take them to South Africa, they will be surprised. It won't take them 2 hours. They will put them in their place. They will put them in their place. So yeah, you can say individual racism. You find here, you walk on the street, you find an average people you will look at say, oh, average, you call them, I don't like calling people white. They will greet you first. Hello, how are you? You don't find that in really racist environment. Racism is all over the world, it's existing. But individual racism, like folks, like people actually not being, you are not threatened by them. You get what I mean? You can see on the bus, you can see people greet you, you can see it. So individual racism and societal racism to a very large extent, for me, it's non-existent compared to even a place like South Africa, 30 years, close to 30 years now after Mandela. So for me, it is virtually, it is none. I don't say this, you've not seen racism if you call what is happening in Ireland on individual and societal level racism. Institutional, yes. But you can see there is no institution here. Is it the police? Is it the military? Is it the post office? That there is not a consciousness and there is not an anti-racist element of training to say, okay, this is how you conduct with people of other ethnics. This is how, and it is there in the post office, in funding agency that they say, okay, equal opportunity. So there is actually, they might not be sincere about it, they might not, but it is noted. You find more anti-racist training, anti-racist consciousness in the institution than you will find in places like I've just mentioned, like say in South Africa, for example. That is there. But the big problem, that is why we come in. But the big problem that actually affects racism I'm concerned about is civilizational racism. And that is where we are focusing on heritage studies as a decolonizing paradigm to address this civilizational racism. Because without addressing this civilizational racism, that other people don't have heritage, other people don't have history, you cannot be able to upset the institutional racism that is embedded in public institutions like the police, like the educational system, like religion. You get, but to a large extent, individual and societal racism is, if you are coming from South Africa and you are black, either you are black, no matter either you are South African, you are South African, you will say you will think racism has disappeared. Look at how people live here. There is no place where only black people live and it is marked by poverty, by lack of infrastructure. You live, even your next door neighbor is folks. You don't find that as every day in a place like South Africa. Folks, black live somewhere, white live somewhere, economic opportunity are reserved here. You know, this is deprivation. If you go in a place, the moment you look at the environment, you know if it's white or black. In South Africa, you don't find that there. And the attitude of people on everyday basis, even their continence to you, you don't find that fear. I know, for me, living personally, I think it's better life to live in Africa. But I fear for the kids. They don't know racism. If they go there, they put them in their place in 2 minutes. In 2 minutes, some people, they will even get hurt. That because they don't know, they will think it is air. They go and start making unnecessary argument. They get hurt. But institutional racism too, it is being addressed. Every institution here will find equal opportunities. You find logos there. They teach them in school. They try to involve people. You get what I mean? So they are addressing that. But how do we address all this? It's through addressing civilizational racism, bringing out other heritage. That is not only white heritage that is in the world. There are other heritage of African that should be recognized. That is civilizational. And on policing, me and you will come from a continent. You cannot say, and that is why a lot of things is happening there. The way you can talk to an Irish police, you dare not talk to a Nigerian police like that. Hello?
Yeah, I'm listening. Yeah.
You dare not talk to a Nigerian police like that. You can, no matter what you say you do or what happens to you, physically it can start slapping you and beating you up on the streets. So you can see a level of policing. What we talk about when we talk about African racism and policing is that most people police their environment, and you have more trust in the police if you find somebody like you, a policeman. It's been a long time. There are even, as you say, there are people who are born here who are 40, 50 years old, 60, 70 years old, But it's like a novelty now to find a policeman, a black police, African policeman, and you are policing Africans. So for you to have trust in the police, you need people that looks like you in the police. So that is one thing, and they should form more policing, community policing that involve, and I think it should be existing that involve Africans and ethnic minorities in the police. But in policing should be in Ireland should be like they should encourage bringing in other ethnics. Like you see a black policeman, a black immigration, so you are more comfortable. Now this one is not.
I think that is happening now.
Yeah, that is good. So it's not skewed against you. So for me, that is it. And on the public inquest, I read about it in the newspaper and I followed it to a certain extent. And there's more to it. So I don't want to go too much into that because there's more to it. There's a lot of things about police, like everywhere, even in America, Black Lives Matter and what happened to George. But a lot of things too about our young people too. A lot. If you and so it's other than being a problem of policing, I want to start looking at the mental health issues among our young people in Ireland. I've seen a lot of serious that this. What do you say? This is mental health. People don't want to understand that among young people. You get what I mean? So,
but do you think there should be a public inquest? Do you because it's about supporting the idea of having a public inquest into it, making it public, bringing out the evidence, let the people see and let the people make the decision, rather than making it, because if we don't, because the I think what the community is saying is that this is the first time something like that. This will be the first time something like that will happen. That a young man in Ireland is shot dead by a police officer. We've seen a case of Toyosi that he was shot. He was killed by a fellow citizen. A young boy at his age then was killed. But what we are saying is that in order for this not to be something that we continue existing, that we are calling for a public inquest. So are you in support of that, of a public inquest?
Personally, I will be very honest with myself. You see, we want an investigation and an inquest. Either it is public or private. You get what? It should be just a thorough investigation. Public inquest might be nice because we have a lot of audience and there are a lot of newsroom and we can play to the gallery. It doesn't necessarily mean it will bring out the truth or it will stop what is happening. What we need is a detailed study, a detailed analysis of what is happening. Public inquest, we do it every day in the newspaper. It's been done all over the world, and what it will achieve. Because I won't want to comment, but for me, what we need is a thorough investigation, thorough analysis of it, public or private. You get what I mean? Sometimes public bring more things. It brings public attention, media attention to it, which actually deflects from the core issue that should be investigated if it is done in private with dedicated people, and then the reports and the proceedings are now, it's open, it's transparent. But if you just have something in the court, everybody come, the newspaper come, it become like a carnival on its own. So you don't even have time to establish the deep, substantive issues. Because this is not a question for public. This is a question of jurisprudence, a question of psychology, a question of community development, a question of integration. You get what I mean? So either public or private, it should just be thorough and it should be transparent. So and I'm not.
Yeah, go ahead.
And I'm not the best because I'm not the best competent person to talk about it. So I will just say that's my own position. Yeah.
No. You've answered the question. So thank you so much. The whole idea of the question is to see that as a community, we've seen what happened. We don't want that to ever happen again in our community, either to an adult, either to a child, either to a teenager, either to a boy or a girl. This is something that we don't ever want to happen. And I believe, yes, you're right to say that either it is public or private, that the most important thing is that there's a thorough investigation into it. And that the truth, but why we want public, why as a community, we vote for the idea of public inquest is that there's a lot of lies around the incident and the truth needs to be out. there in the public, and we want the police to put the truth out there so that the narrative that is out there can be changed. It has been changed already. There's a lot of changes that is happening with the narrative, and I think by now people already know that the boy himself has never ever committed a crime in any way in this country. He was a good footballer. He was somebody's son. His name is George Nkensho. We want the public to know that he's not a criminal, and we want the public to know that he deserves justice. Every woman being deserves justice. He also deserves justice, and there's no reason at any point in time for somebody to be shot down 6 times without he wasn't possessing a gun or anything. It was in front of his house, and recently we've seen cases of people that have been talked down. Somebody that actually shot a guard, recently here in Ireland, that happened. Somebody that was actually carrying and threatening, but instead of they talk him down. So that is what we are just trying to say. We want this to be open, but taking from what you said, we want it to be thorough investigation. We want it to be thorough and thorough. We want the community to be supported in terms of this. So I'm going to say to our audience out there that has joined the 4SERIES Masterclass on African identity by myself, Susuana Olatunji Komolafe, and this is featuring Olusegun Morakinyo, the Independent Research Director of the African Heritage Institute. It's a big thank you for this first episode on what is African identity to you. And I'm saying to everyone out there that is watching us, and those people that will have the opportunity to see this video, those of you that will have the opportunity to follow the 4SERIES Masterclass on African identity, to join us next week and to bring your questions and to let us start talking about it. So a summary of today is this: individual racism, community racism is very low here in Ireland. We need to start talking about that. It's very low, and we don't want that to go higher. Very, very low, and we have to take control of it, that we can eradicate it totally. We might not be able to totally eradicate it, but if we can bring it to a place whereby it becomes we see it as being eradicated. Institutional racism do happen, and it's very loud here in Ireland today. We know that, we believe that, but we are hoping that coming together, learning about who we are, getting people to know us more, and participating in the community, and calling the government into order here in the Western world, here in Ireland, that we all live together. We need to speak aloud with what we want and what we are expecting, and the kind of narrative we want to be in the public eyes. I can do it alone. You can do it alone. But together, we can do it. And we can make the change that we want. So, guys, I'm looking forward to you guys joining us on our second episode on this 4SERIES Masterclass on African identity. One thing I've taken home is that we're going to be talking about our state of mind, which brings us to the African psychology, a change of narrative by Susuana Olatunji Komolafe. So our second episode will be on African psychology. What is African psychology? How does that reflect our identity as an African? And I'm going to be having to show my Africanness again. And, we talk about that whatever you're doing, let your Afrocentric being reflected, and what make you an African person. Not just your blackness, but being African. So join me and Olusegun Morakinyo next time on this 4SERIES Masterclass on African identity, whereby we have so much to explore. So go onto our Facebook page, register to take part in a series of workshops that we are going to be doing by the African History Educational Center for African Study. and one of our lecturer that will be facilitating the workshop. You already met one of them today, which is Mr. Olusegun Morakinyo. So thank you, Mr. Olusegun Morakinyo, for joining me today. It's a pleasure to have the opportunity to start this 4 series masterclass with you, and to the public that is watching us, to everyone out there. Look out for the information. You can find this information on our Facebook page. A moment, you can find it on our LinkedIn, on our YouTube. And I'm going to let Uncle Morakinyo say his goodbye at this moment. You wanted to say something?
Yeah, sorry, sis. I just want to say I'm Dr. Olusegun Morakinyo by the...
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry. I think you tried to take away there. Sorry for that. So it's Dr. Olusegun Morakinyo. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for the opportunity to converse with you, and thanks for the audience too. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So bye to everyone. Enjoy your nice weather today, this Saturday morning.